Hello, I'm Russ of Giddy Video, and today we're going to be drawing and animating this fella. He's not Satan, Satan is a bad man. This is Stan, and he's adorable. He's made of 2D layers. You've got two joysticks that you can see at the top right of your screen that you can drag to animate his head and have him look around with kind of an illusion of 3D-ness, of depth to his head, and also a joystick to allow him to breathe. You can also apply a couple of behaviours to automate that process so he'll just keep going without you. Here we are inside of Apple Motion. I've decided to make this 1080 project, 25 frames per second. So let's get stuck in. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to create a shape. That's a rectangle. There is one of his pecs. We're going to rename that shape L-pec, left pectoral. We're going to rename the group chest. So let's look at this left pec. There's no reason for it to be minus 150.2. Let's make our lives easy. That's at 0. The Y number will become more important in a second because we're going to create his other pec and we're going to mirror it. So for the moment, shape geometry, let's round off those edges a little bit. I've got that at 15. And then style, we're going to change the colour to a nice devilish red or orange, something a bit more like that. Happens if we mirror that as it is. That's minus 190. We'll make our right pec plus 190. That's not bad. Small gap between them. Let's increase that very slightly. I'm going to try 195. Left pec to mirror that will be minus 195. That's looking pretty good. So down. Now, because the setting for the roundness on this larger shape hasn't changed for the smaller shape, it looks a bit too round to my eye. So I'm going to turn that down to something 10. Let's just drag a ruler across, left click from the left of the screen, minus 131 will make that. And we're going to rename it left ab, L-ab. Command and D to create a duplicate of the left ab, rename that right ab, or ab. The left one was at minus 131 on the x-axis, so we'll put this one at plus 131, creating beautiful symmetry. So, click the right ab, with shift held down, click the left, command D to duplicate the pair of them on the y-axis, down you come. It's beginning to look a bit like some muscles there. And we want next to create our heart in the middle of his chest there. So that's easy enough. That will be a circle shape. Hold shift, of course, to make sure that it's a perfect circle. Put that where you want it. Check its dead center by putting the x-axis to 0. All about the symmetry. Shape, fill and an outline. You want to go to fill. Nice bright red. There we go. And then the outline. Ooh, where do we want? About 12. I've got the outline there. And for the colour, let's find a sort of brownish, darkish, grim colour. Oh, a bit more red. Yeah, getting there. I want all these colours to be sort of orange through yellow through brown. So, let's have a look at that. That's pretty good. Do you know what? I'm going to put I've put the outline actually at 16. There's his chest. I'm going to take that chest and highlight it, and I'm going to put it in a group that we're going to rename Body. So, within that group, we need to give him a back and some shoulder blades. So, rectangle tool. Little higher than the pecs, a little wider than the abs, and a little lower. It's going to be off screen by the time we're done. I'm going to drag that and put it in the body group underneath in this menu here, underneath, so behind the chest. Properties, I said properties 0. So it's dead center. We're going to go to shape, Geometry, add a little roundness, because that's the style that we're going for. I've put that at 12. Now for a colour. I'm thinking, just drop of that. Same, but a bit darker than that. There we go. And we're going to rename that back. And now we want some shoulder blades. So, because I like the colour so much, I'm just going to duplicate the back. The size is going to be nowhere near as big. Shrink that down, drag it and pop it up here somewhere. That's still way too big. Maybe more like that. I'm going to increase the width. So get it looking something like that. Let's have a look. Let's tweak that a bit more. I quite like that. So rename that left shoulder. Duplicate. Rename right shoulder. Apple, if you're listening, please get rid of this thing that Motion does where when you duplicate a level it says copy automatically. It's so irritating. Right, properties. The other one is at -197. I like round numbers, so we'll call it -195, because if you start entering values it's easier to deal with. Right shoulder we'll put at +195. There we go. I'm actually going to group the left and right shoulder as well, so that later on they can move in unison. And just rename that shoulders. Just collapsing some of those down. We need a quick neck, rectangle. Make it quite long because some of his head is going to be in front of that. So take that rectangle, put it behind the, in front of the shoulders. There we are. X to 0, get him in the middle. There we are. Nah, he needs a thicker, chunkier neck than that. Geometry, size, width. There we go, a little bit of girth. 125. Okay, and the colour. There we are. He's maybe a tiny bit lighter. There we are. He has a neck, which we're going to rename neck. So that is the body. We're going to take that group, we're going to just pull it down to the bottom of the screen. There we are. He is about ready for us to add a head. Right, I'm not sure exactly when I let this slip through the net, but you'll notice that this body group has been left as a 3D group. That's a no-no. I've switched it back to a 2D group, and I've ended up with a group up here. If you haven't got a group up there, create one and call that head. So I'm sure you can guess what we're going to do in this layer. We're going to take a rectangle group. We're going to draw him a head. Make sure it's dead center. You know the drill by now, a bit of roundness. I'm going to add quite a bit of roundness there. 27, 29, 30. I'm just going to try and sell the idea that that's almost cylindrical. Now, am I happy with the position? Let's bring his head down a little bit. Going to choose ourselves a colour that we like. There we go, his head's kind of quite a darker orange there. Okay, so within this 2D group now, we are going to think of where the depth would be of the features. For instance, quite far back would be our two little eyes. Let's give them an eye. That's yellow. Properties. About -65, I think. Maybe there. Oh, I just need to label these. So I'll call that one head. Call this one left eye. Li. Duplicate. Change that from -65 to 65. Now they're way too wide set for my liking. Let's bring it into, let's call it 40. So you can see what I like to do is I'll often drag the numbers and see where I like them. And then if you, for instance, got 39.7, there's no point having that. Change it to 40. Because then if you need to retype that, it's an easy number to quickly type. They're way too deep set. I'm going to push those out a little bit to -45 and 45. I think that's a little bit better. Now, what I said about the illusion of depth. So the head is the bottom layer within this group. The eyes are in front of that. So when we draw his nose, we want to, let's just centre that. We want the nose in front of the eyes because they would be, the nose would be forward of the eyes, wouldn't it? I'm going to thicken that nose up a little bit. Size, width. I'm going to round it off as well on those corners. Now let's just have a look at where the eye is. What I'm hoping to do, you see, when we start to move the head around, as he moves his head left, for instance, you would start to see more of this eye. Same for this one. So I actually want the eyes to be slightly tucked behind there. So actually, let's have a look at how tucked behind that is. Yeah, that's not too bad really. Okay, let's change the colour of the nose because that's not the colour we want. So the nose is going to be darker. And we're going to bring the nose up a little bit because that nose in turn is going to be partially tucked away behind this big grumpy brow. Just put that in the centre. Gonna add a curve to the edges there, to roundness. Let's give him quite a dark brow. There we go. Still don't like the colour of the nose. Bit more red in there and a little bit darker. Now let's see where the, rename that brow. So we want there to be, we want the eyes to be tucked behind the brow and the nose. Oh, rename that one. Right eye. Yeah. So I'm going to raise that a bit to, let's call that 255 on the y-axis. Oops, excuse me, that's not right. 255. Same for the left one. And then, so as you can see, some of the nose is tucked behind the brow, some of the eyes are tucked behind the brow and the nose. In fact, let's broaden that nose perhaps a little more. Like so. Because what you don't want is, as the head turns, to sort of reveal gaps between the eye and the nose and the brow and everything else. We're going to give him a big jaw next. We want that to start below the chin, because what we want again is as the head turns, there we go. Let's do that actually. Let's use the dropper tool and do that the same colour as his nose. There we go. And, oh, rename it Jaw. Now, what we're going to do, watch this carefully. I'm going to duplicate the jaw twice. Command D, Command D. We'll come back to that later when I show you why. In fact, let's group that. And a 2D group labelled jaw. Remember that, we'll come back to that later. And the head, he's a horny little devil. There's one horn. It's a bit more orangey, a bit sort of lighter so that it stands out. And you'll notice what I keep doing, there's a lot of overlap, so that when we move the head around, there's no gaps and the horn doesn't float off into space. Call that the right horn. In fact, I will also make that quite rounded actually. And then we'll duplicate that, rename it left horn. So the right one we'll put at 170, just round that off, so that when we go to the left horn, it's minus 170, and you're not sort of going minus 171 point. There we go. Now, take both those horns, drag them down because they need to be behind the head. There we go. In fact, you know what? They're quite thick, so I'm going to highlight both. Go to the size, wind the width down a little. There we go. They're at 40. And that's his head. So our character's really beginning to take shape now. He's got a body. Let's lock that there so that we don't mess with it. He's got a head. Collapse that and lock it. We're going to create a new group, and we are going to call this group Wings. Go and create a Bezier curve. So the wing probably start about there. I'll drag that so that there's a bit of a curve to this, and then click down there and add a bit of a curve to that. Press enter. Get rid of the fill. We don't want a fill. We just want a shape that we're going to apply to a Bezier, to a replicator to create the wings. So I'll have a quick tweak of the, so the wing might start there. Now in a bit we're going to put it behind his body, obviously. And we'll drag this until you're kind of happy with the shape. So we're going to hide the head and the body while we do this. So there's the wings basic shape. We're going to create a rectangle. This is going to be kind of the feathers that make up the wing. So there we go. Let's make it a bit of a dark colour because it will be behind him. Sort of like, it gives a bit of an illusion of depth for this, I think. If the wings are darker because they're behind him, it gives the illusion that maybe there's light cast on the main character and the wings are slightly outside of the light. So we've got a rectangle. That's going to be, I'll call that feather, just so that I remember what that is. Now select the feather and click replicate. So over on our replicator, shape, geometry, drag your Bezier shape into the shape source. That's beginning to make a bit of sense. There we go. We'll go to the original feather. Go and tweak its anchor point. Oops. Right, so there's our original feather. The anchor point here. We'll move to the top. There. hide that now. So what I think I'll do, so that we can see what we're doing, is I'm going to, within the wings group, I'm going to take the replicator, put that at 0, 0 on the X and Y axis. I'm going to go to our Bezier curve. 0, oops, 0, 0. And you can see how the two work together. Go to the replicator. How many points? Let's say 8. That's starting to look a bit like a wing. Now what we need to do next is have fun with the shape of this. At the moment, it doesn't look a lot like a wing. What we want really is for the feathers to start smaller at the sort of end that is close to the character's back, and then get bigger towards the end. So this bit will be a little bit of trial and error. So over in the replicator controls, we have scale and scale end. So there's the overall scale. So let's make them, you see here, so they start with the feathers that big, and then the scale end, they get bigger like this, and we can individually change the X and Y scale against the scale end. So let's have a think. Currently got 8 points. I'm going to try increasing that to 10. Now a lot of what numbers you add here depends on how big your rectangle ended up, so your original feather. And don't forget, you can go back, in fact as I am going to do, because these should be round. So I'm going to go back to the feather that was the original one and add some roundness, and you can see because it's a replicator, let's put that at 8, because it's a replicator it's rounded off all subsequent replications of that feather. Now let's have a look. I'm wondering if I should change the overall shape of this wing ever so slightly. So looking at our Bezier that we based our replicator around, I've selected it. I'm going to go and edit points. Just tweak it a little bit. So I want there to be a sharper angle at the body end, because what I'm going to do hopefully is bring some of these points a bit closer together. And I'm actually make that part of the wing a bit longer. So just tweaked that. Now we go to the replicator and re-drag the Bezier, and you can see that it's changed to suit. Now maybe if we change the starting scale on the x-axis to be a little wider to bring those shapes closer together. So I'm going to bring down the scale of the x-axis slightly for the end of the scale. Now this is a case of feel free to tweak until you have an effect that you like the look of. Oops, didn't mean to do that one. Let's look. I want to affect the beginning scale on the y-axis and increase. Okay. So you toy with that until you're happy. What you can also do is we're going to go to colour mode. We're going to change that to over pattern. So we need to add some whites and some reds to this. So there's a darker colour and a lighter colour over that pattern. So put some red in there. So they're probably the kind of colours we want. If you look over here, you click it and it will reverse the direction that the pattern goes. And we want to go up to reverse stacking, which will flip that. There we go. So you can see the wing starting to take shape. I'm going to bring our character back. I'm going to put the wings behind the body where they truly belong. Let's move them around until they look. There we go. I'm going to hide the replicator. Sorry, the Bezier. We don't necessarily need that now. So there we go. There's our wings. I want to tweak that further now that we can see it with our character. So I want the end scale on the y-axis to be a lot longer. Some badass wings there. So the start scale I'm going to bring down a little. End scale on the X. Make that look quite a bit fatter. Do you know what? I'm actually going to add a few shapes here. So I'm going to add 12. Do you know what? I think that's looking better. I'm going to go back to the original Bezier again, because we can. Just tweak, tweak, tweak until it looks good. Change the shape ever so slightly. And then, of course, back to the replicator, drag the Bezier back in, and it'll adjust to suit. Go back down to edit points, back to replicator, drag the Bezier back in. There we go. That's looking a bit better. So there's our wing. Now the group it's in, because we were having a look at it earlier and tinkering with it and just creating the one wing. In fact, I will rename that replicator L wing. So because we were looking at just the one wing, the wings group isn't central. We're going to put the X position at 0, then go back to the left wing and drag it to where we think it should go on the X-axis. We will say about there, so I'm going to make that minus 330. Again, depending on the size of the shapes you've created, these could all wind up a little bit different, so feel free to tinker and you do what you need to do to make it look right. So I'm going to Command D, the left wing, and I'm going to rename that right wing. Go to Properties, Rotation, rotate it 180 degrees, and then put that at 330. There we go, he's nice and symmetrical. And because wings are a group to themselves, it means that we can add behaviours later. We can make them go up and down like that, for instance. Now we are getting to the fun bit, also the complicated bit. So, create a group. Call this Controls. And within that group, make 2 circles. And put each one of those in a group. So you've got a group called Controls, a group that you're going to name Head Control, and a circle inside that, name Head Stick. It's going to be your joystick. And then this group we're going to call Chest Control, and the circle inside that we're going to call Chest Stick, because it's a joystick. Now, put the head control group at 0, chest control at 0. So currently everything is dead center of the screen. What we are going to do is we're going to drag the controls group up here. And the head control we're going to put at, let's think, 50? 100. Let's put that at 100 on the Y position. And the chest control at minus 100. Now the key thing here that we are doing is making sure that the joysticks are at 0, 0 within their groups. So the controls group is up there. And I'm going to add some labels. So text. And we will label the top one Head. Might as well put it at 0. Oops, a daisy! Put that at 0. I've just centre aligned the text there. Your font doesn't really matter. There we go, I found our font. It was called Metal Mania. That's quite funky. So that text just labels head. Duplicate that. This one is going to say chest. Change that so it says chest. Zero on the x-axis. There we go. Just going to actually bring those controls close together. Very important when you move these, the stick needs to be 0, 0 inside the group. Move the group that it's in. There we go. We have a quick fix to make if you've made the same mistake as me. I've started the in points for the controls at 4:22. We don't want that. We want it to begin at the start of the project. I use Shift to highlight all those. Press I to select my endpoint. That's all fixed. You might have had more sense than me. Let's start working on the motion of the head. The position of that is going to be determined by the position of this head joystick. Let's have a quick clean up, fold away, minimise the wings groups, the body groups, the chest control group. We're interested in the head group and the head control group. We're going to create the illusion of depth just like we did with the chest by moving different things at different rates. So the further forward on his head something is, the more it will move. So the jaw is going to move more than the brow, which is going to move in turn more than the nose, and then more than the eyes, the frame of the head, and the horns. For now, though, we're going to look at the overall position of the head. So head, we're going to look at the position, add parameter behavior, link. We're going to drag the head stick into there. Just going to check that the head stick is at 0, 0 within its group. Yes, it is. And we're going to set limits on the movement of the head stick, because at the moment it can come all the way off, which obviously we don't want. Just like the chest, we want there to be limits to that. We go to the X position of the head stick, add parameter behavior, clamp. So this is just for the X axis. And we will try -100 pixels for the minimum and 100 for the maximum. We'll rename it clamp X so that we don't get confused. Let's try. Now I'm mainly looking at the jaw right now. So the jaw is at a ratio of 1:1 to the joystick. So that the jaw is where I want it to go. Oh, not on the Y-axis, just the X. And when I get to it, I'm going to have the head itself move less. So this edge of the head to the neck may well look a bit more natural. So I'll put him roughly in the middle. So that's our X clamp. Back to the head stick. We want to clamp the Y movement to the same, -100 to 100. And we'll rename that clamp Y so that we know what we are doing. So our link behavior is now on the head. Let's quickly, so that we can move the left and right eye together, group those in a group called eyes. Collapse that. The horns, you shift and click again to group them. That's going to be in a group called horns. And we're going to hide the horns, the eyes, the nose and the brow. I'm going to take this link behavior and put it on the jaw. Let's ignore for now that we created 3 identical rectangles within the jaw group. We're just going to apply this to the jaw. I'm going to Command and D to create a copy of that and drag that over to the head. For some reason this has switched to replace with source. Put it to add to source if that's happened to you. I thought I'd turn his nose off. There we go, his nose has disappeared. Change the ratio for the link of the head position on there where it says scale to 0.6. Now let's move our joystick. So can you see the jaw is moving more than the head? That's the beginning of us making it look like there's some depth to the head. Go to that link on the head, and we need one for the horns, one for the horns, we need one for the eyes, the nose, the brow. That's 4 more link behaviours. So I'm going to go to that, Command D, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Drag one of them to the horns, drag one of them to the eyes, drag one of them to the nose, and drag one of them to the brow. And let's turn those all back on so that we can see them. So the head rectangle is moving at a scale of 0.6. The eyes will make them move at 0.9, so that's not as much as the jaw, but certainly quite a bit more than the basic head. The nose, 0.9. The brow, 0.9. The horns, we want those to move slower than the head rectangle, which is moving at 0.6. So we'll make the horns move at a ratio of 0.5. Let's see where we are when we move the head joystick. The jaw's moving more than the head, but there's an obvious problem, and that's that you can see around the back of his jaw. Well, if you remember, we created 3 rectangles which are identical and put them within a group called jaw. We're going to rename those. The foreground one, of course it's at the top of these layers, we're going to call jaw 1. There's one that's in the middle, jaw 2, sort of in the mid-ground, and there's one called jaw 3, which will be nearest to the head. This link that's on the group, drag it down and put it on jaw 1. Now duplicate it twice, Command D, put one on jaw 2 and one on jaw 3. And we're going to adjust the scale so that some of them moving more than others gives a bit of a sense that actually this is some kind of solid object. So the jaw at the back, jaw 3, let's go to the scale and play with it. So it wants to be flush with the edge of this part of the face. So let's try 0.4. Nope, that's wrong. 0.7 perhaps. So if I just turn, so now it's not really moving too far away from the face. See, 0.75 we start to see off the edge. So 0.7 appears to be the sweet spot. Now that's left this ugly stepping stone here, which is where our middle piece of the jaw comes along. So somewhere between 0.7 and 1.0, which I would make 0.85. Much less of a stepping stone. Now if you really want to go for it, we can create another one. So 0.8 for that one and 0.9 for that one. The idea being we want to reduce this stepping stone effect. So let's go with that. If we go to the head joystick now, that is looking pretty good. That's our joysticks in place then. The chest can lower and raise like that as if he's breathing. The head can look around. So rigging like this could be useful. For instance, you could go down here, go into record mode, go to the start of your timeline, and you could move the joystick so at the beginning of the animation he's looking down to the left. We go to 3 and a bit seconds in. He's looking to the top right. We go to 4 seconds something, and he's looking down again. We've created this path, which means that when you go back and press play, your animation is created. So you could set up a character like that, do the animation, hide the controls, and render. And you will have rendered an animated character. And you could apply controls like that to various elements. You could add some rotation to the wings or the arms, anything like that. It's up to you. Now how joysticks work, we did talk at the start of the video about adding some automation to this so that he will idle away. You can either enable the automation, the behaviour that will let him breathe and look around on his own, or you can disable that and operate him with the joysticks. For that reason, because we give you the option of both in this example, we apply the behaviours to the joystick, because this means that when you disable the behaviour you can still use the joystick. And of course, if the behaviour is applied to the joystick, then all those ratios of how much the facial features move in relation to each other, or how much the chest moves and everything, all those values remain. So we're going to go to the chest stick, go to its properties, go to the Y position, and we're going to add a behaviour, oscillate, which if I go to the keyframe editor down here, you can see oscillate will oscillate, funnily enough, between a couple of points, and you can make that value larger or smaller. We are going to set the amplitude to 10, not a very big amount, the speed to 5. In fact, that's become almost impossible to see on the keyframe editor because it's such a small value, but I've just zoomed in there and you can see those values. You can see how the chest will lower and raise. We get rid of, there we go, you can see that better. So he's just gently breathing in and gently breathing out. That's your first bit of automation. So you can increase the amount if you want him to say look a bit more panicked. Let's put it at 15 and put both values to 15. So he's breathing a lot heavier, up to 25 on the speed. Oh, he's a bit panicked now. So that allows you to automate that process. Let's put it back to 10 and 5. That's the nice gentle breath. So let's add some automated motion to his head and have him look around the place a little bit. Go to the head stick properties, position at the top there, add parameter behavior, and randomize. Apply to properties, transform, position, X and Y. We don't really want to involve the Z or Z, as we say over here in Britain, to that equation. We're going to set it to add and subtract. So if I hit play now, he goes bonkers. We want the amount that his head moves by to be, let's say, 90. Which is quite a lot, and you can see over here the path that his head takes. We're going to take away the noisiness, because that really makes him look crazy, and we're going to turn the frequency right down to 0.3. And he will calmly start to scope around the place. We go to the chest control, chest stick. That oscillation is on, lovely. So he's really starting to come to life now. You could, for instance, put that bottom right at the side of a lower third or something and have him just animating away. Now what I would like to do, just to give him a little more life, is... Oh, and that's one more thing, by the way. When you're going to apply the randomize, make sure that the head stick is at 0, 0, or you could potentially have some very strange effects. So we've dragged his head over, put randomize on, and everything's weighted to one side, and you're not really going to get the effect you necessarily want. For instance, he's just looking over to one side. You need to disable the randomize. Go to your stick position, 0, 0, then apply the randomize. What I want to do, though, just quickly, is going to go to the anchor point of the head and just pop that where I think the base of his skull might meet the neck. Then I'm going to go to rotation on the Z axis. The Z, of course, travelling from near to you, far into the screen. So if you rotate around that axis, your depth axis, it's going to go like that. I'm going to put that to 0 and put a tiny, tiny amount of randomised behaviour on that. And I mean a tiny amount. So that's the crazy looking effect again. We switch the apply mode to add and subtract. We change the amount to, let's try 1. That's 2. That's really not much at all. 2. Turn the noisiness off and put the frequency to 0.5. So his head's very, very subtly drifting around the place now. I just think that when we now put randomize on, it just adds a little bit of movement. And you can play to your heart's content there with the speed of that behaviour, the amount. Don't forget, if you go to the random seed for any randomised behaviour, you can click it again and again, and it'll just change the way, change the random number around which this random behaviour is based. So down to the head, the same thing there. There he is. Now, the blinking took me a little while to work out, but we got there. Let's open up the head and look at his eyes. Let's actually hide some of his features so that we can see those. Let me see those peepers. And I'm going to actually disable the movement so that we can just take a look at his eyes. Okay. So we want him to blink kind of randomly. Now, I was trying to work out how to do that. So let's go to the scale of the eyes. The scale on the Y position. Well, we want to randomize the eyes a little bit. But if we go randomize behavior and we tell it to subtract by up to 100%, so that'll go from 100% is the eyes open to subtracting 100%, that being the eyes closed. Now, that's not how people blink. The eyes need to be open for the majority of the time, and then occasionally at random, blink, 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 blink. Silly noises aside, you get the idea. So you go, well, what could I do? Maybe I could go to the properties, go to scale, go to the Y. What if we had an oscillate? Well, that's no use to us either, because oscillation just kind of blinks like that. Again, that's not correct. So, what it occurred to me to do is as follows. See the eyes there? We're going to Command D to duplicate them. And we're going to turn these into a null object. So, null eyes. And I'm going to drag them over here. So these are for reference. We're going to put a randomized behavior on the scale. Oh, we're also going to go to your anchor point, edit that. Let's just get so we can see it. And put the put the anchor point at the top there. So when the Y scale of the object changes, it goes and hides up there. So there are not eyes. Our randomized behavior. We just go back out. We'll press play. The randomized behavior is going to be by an amount of 100%. It's going to subtract. Now that doesn't look very much like blinking eyes. However, if we go to these eyes here, to our main eyes that is, and we go to the Y scale and we link that to our null object. So we drag the null eyes into there, that becomes a source object. So right now they're just copying. What we are going to do on the eyes, on the link behavior, is apply link when value is between minimum and maximum. So the minimum and maximum that we're going to set for the Y minimum is 0. For the Y maximum is 15. So let's just see what that does. Not quite there yet. What we have to do is go to here, clamp source within range, untick that. Now let's hit play. Hello, that's a bit more like it. So what's happening is the null eyes are randomly getting smaller on the y-axis, so they keep shrinking. The scale of these eyes here are linked to that, but they only respond when the value of the y is between 0 and 15% scale. I hope I've explained that well enough. So by looking at the null eyes, looking at the randomized behavior, let me just hit play again. So at the moment, every single time it goes below 15% size, they blink. So if I go over to the frequency and slow that down to 1.5, so that's much slower, and every time the value goes beneath 15%, the real eyes on the character suddenly go, oh, I should be scaling as well, and that's what they do. There you go. One little thing that I failed to do, if I go to our actual eyes, just want to change the anchor point so that it's at the top of that shape. Now if I turn the brow and the nose on, hopefully now when I press play, there we go. The blinking's still a bit quick, so you can adjust the speed and how much he blinks. So you could go to the eyes link and reduce the window in which the scale is, if you like, listening to the null object. So now it requires, instead of requiring the scale on the null to go below 15, it's relying on it to go below 10. And likewise, another way to tweak it would you go to the randomize on the null eyes and do things like change the frequency and the noisiness. The noisiness can sort of sometimes affect how long this hovers below that 15 or 10% mark. So we're going to hide the null. I'm going to activate the randomized behaviors on our head again. There he is. So there we go, and there he is in all his glory. He's quite a handsome devil, I think you'll agree. I've just been back and tweaked a few of the values for the automation, and I've just tweaked the colours a bit to make him a bit more vibrant. A little bit of glow on the eyes, a bit of a glow effect on this chest plate thing. If you're still here, well done, thanks for sticking around, and I'm hoping to see your variations on this technique all over the internet. Thanks for watching. Please follow me on Twitter, I'm on there as GiddyVideo, and if you visit giddyvideo.co.uk, you'll be able to see some examples of my work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.